And we're broadcasting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the COVID-19 CommunityResources.com town hall meeting powered by the Center for Closing the Health Gap. This is going to be a really hot topic today. We are going to talk about the clinical trials that are ongoing right now for the much awaited COVID-19 vaccine. And the real question is, should you participate in these trials? So we're going to talk about that. I'm your moderator. I'm Cincinnati City Council member Jan-Michele Kearney. First, I have to give a shout out to our tech team. We've got John Reichel making all the tech stuff happen. And we've got Lauren Harden, who is looking for your questions on Facebook Live, the Health Gap's Facebook Live page. Just put them in the chat. Those of you joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A and we will get them to our wonderful panelists. Just a note, I think you all know we are recording this session. We will have it for rebroadcast on COVID-19 CommunityResources.com. Also some other sites, some of our other partners broadcast the town hall meetings as well. So get ready, get your questions ready, sit back. We're going to get some good information about these COVID-19 clinical trials and see where we are with this vaccine so we can get our life back together. Oh my goodness. Okay, let me introduce our panelists. We have, and let me just say, Dr. Carl Fichtenbaum from UC Health is on the way, so he will be here soon. John will let us know when he joins. But we have Dr. James Powell. And we're so excited. Dr. James Powell is Principal Investigator for the National Medical Association Project Impact. He's also the Chief Medical Officer for NoRx Incorporated. So we're really excited to have Dr. James Powell here. We also have our Cincinnati Health Commissioner, Dr. Melba Moore, always with great information. So glad you're here. And then we have a longtime friend of mine, Dr. Camille Jones, and she is here representing the Cincinnati Medical Association. I hope you all know about the National Medical Association. Those are our Black doctors across the country and even internationally. And then we have our Cincinnati Medical Association. Those are the Black doctors here. So when people say, how do I find a Black doctor who's an ophthalmologist, who's a gynecologist? You want to look for your Cincinnati Medical Association directory. So we are so glad that Dr. Camille Jones is here. So I'd like to welcome all of you.
Here as well, Jan-Michele.
Oh, Dr. Fichtenbaum is here? Great. So we have Dr. Carl Fichtenbaum, and he is with UC Health, and he's one of the leaders in the clinical trials that are going on here. He's, as I understand, the leader of the clinical trials that are going on here. So Dr. Fichtenbaum, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start. I'd like our panelists to make introductory remarks. And Dr. Fichtenbaum, since we introduced you last, why don't you make a few intro remarks first?
All right. Well, Jan-Michele, thank you so much for hosting this. And I'm really delighted to be part of this esteemed panel. I think it's such an important topic. I think that Cincinnati, like many of the other areas around the country, has been struggling with this pandemic. It's really affected our city. It's affected our way of life, our economy, and it has disproportionately affected some communities. We see much higher rates of COVID-19 severe disease in the Black community, and we've seen much higher rates in the Latino and Hispanic communities as well, and disproportionately so. And of course, those who are most vulnerable sometimes are the ones who are not able to access or get the best medical care in a timely fashion, and this has always been a problem. So certainly we've recognized that, and at UC Health and the UC College of Medicine, we've been trying to do our part to help educate people and to take care of people. And we have made it a huge priority to make sure that we have cutting edge new therapies that may be beneficial to people, to be available both in an emergency use basis, but also in research studies and clinical trials, which is the way most of our medications have been approved over years and years and years. So we're delighted to be able to do that, and I'm delighted to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And we do have a lot of questions about clinical trials. So we're excited to have this discussion. Dr. James Powell, any intro remarks, please?
Yeah, I'll just make a few remarks because what I wanted to share with you is a little about my background, how I got here. And one of the things that I spent about 24 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and I've designed or directed probably over 1,000 clinical trials over the time of my career, and including the initial introduction to humans of chemicals, taking a chemical and using a process to turn them into a drug. And one of the things over my career that was of concern to me was that in looking at these trials, we never really had a lot of minorities in the trials. And we began to raise questions of whether or not we understood how to use these products safely and effectively in people like me. And as a part of, very late in my career, I did develop a clinical trials diversity team and really tried to push the issue of clinical trials involvement, and then began working with the National Medical Association on Project Impact, as you mentioned. And that project is increased minority participation and awareness of clinical trials. And what we tried to do there was, first of all, educate community, the consumers, about clinical trials, what they are, why they're important, what the values are in the process, and how you protect, what's the protections in the process, how you protect yourself. And secondly, you might think that most physicians would get a training in clinical research as a part of their education, but most do not. Within the last 10 years, we had advocated, and I think there has been some changes in that with the Association of American Medical College. They are training people. But what we did was develop a program to train physicians on how to be a part of the process, meaning being an investigator, understanding what to do, what the ethics are, what the regulations are, and how you can be successful. Because one of the things we think, and we continue to advocate for is a representation of people from our community at every level of the process. We talk about patients a lot, but we need to have investigators. We need to have people at FDA making those decisions. We need to have the people in the industry who are deciding where and when and how to develop these drugs. We have to have people in that process to make sure we understand and make sure the products that we develop work for people like us. And so I've been involved with Project Impact and doing that for actually over 20 years now. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion, and I appreciate you inviting me to participate in this panel.
Well, thank you so much. We're gonna pull on your wisdom and knowledge and those years of experience, because we do have a lot of questions. So thank you so much. Dr. Melba Moore, our Cincinnati Health Commissioner, our fearless leader through all this COVID-19 mess that we're going through, and she's getting us through it. So I have to thank her for that.
Good
Dr.
afternoon.
Moore, intro remarks. Okay.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor for me to be a part of this discussion. It feels as if last week was the teaser for this week. And last week, we were talking about the flu vaccine.
Right.
And today, we're talking about clinical trials, the pandemic. You know, I take a deep breath, and as I shared last week, if someone had told me, if they had asked me in January, when do you think this is going to end? Probably, you know, would have said, well, you know, we're going to watch the data, take a look and see, and maybe 6 months. So I am so thankful that no one asked me that question in January.
Right.
I would literally be saying right now, I am so sorry I had provided some misinformation.
You and everybody else, because I think all of us thought, yeah, 6 months, this will be over.
Yeah, but you know what? Nonetheless, I know I look at the faces when I'm on these virtual calls during the week with my other colleagues, and you see the stress, you see the fatigue. And I just have to, you just take a deep breath. You just have to keep breathing, breathe in, keep staying focused, understanding this is a fluid situation. Things change. You have to be nimble. You have to adapt, and then continuously provide information, the data. And I've heard twice from Dr. Fichtenbaum and Dr. Powell, education. And that education isn't just at the top, it's across. It's to the patients. You're educating the patients. You're educating the community. We're educating one another. So I am thankful to be here today to offer words of wisdom, information on what I think, what I believe, what it might take, because what we're doing, what's so necessary right now, is we have to offer the hope as we heal and as we move through this pandemic. It is crucial. And what we do, we're the ones that's going to turn the tables as it relates to trust. And you'll hear that later on in our discussion. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I look forward to listening, learning, and providing some comments. And I turn it back over to you, Councilwoman. Thank you.
I am so excited about this discussion because, it lets us know that a vaccine is on the way. We just have to figure out, if we're going to participate in these studies. So you guys are going to have to talk to us about that today. But let's hear from Dr. Camille Jones, and she's here representing the Cincinnati Medical Association.
Greetings, everybody. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a physician. I'm board certified in internal medicine and preventive medicine. And I also, most recently, was assistant health commissioner for the Cincinnati Health Department. I retired about a year ago. And while I was there, I was also chairperson of the Institutional Review Board, or IRB, which is something that reviews proposed studies for human subject safety concerns. So what I want to do is I just want to talk a little bit about, if you're considering being in a study, the first thing that you want to do is to read the informed consent completely, because the informed consent is going to tell you, or should be telling you, what's the purpose of the trial, who's sponsoring it, how is your safety going to be monitored, what are the potential risks, the potential benefits to you, what types of tests or procedures will be performed, how long the trial will last, whether it'll cost you to participate in the trial, if there are adverse events, whether the trial will be helping you take care of those adverse events, who's going to have access to the information from the trial, what are your other treatment choices, what is your chance of getting a placebo or a non-active treatment, and will the drug be available to you once the trial is over if you received the placebo. And so there's a lot of information in the informed consent document. Now, the thing is that a lot of people get scared of the informed consent because they're scared, if I don't understand the informed consent, it's on me. It is not on you. The whole purpose of the informed consent is it must be clear to you, and you must understand everything in it, and you have the right to ask questions till you're satisfied. If you're not satisfied, you don't sign, you don't participate. You ask questions until you're satisfied.
That's good advice. And I'm telling you, as an attorney, I tell my clients the same thing. Don't sign anything that you don't understand. If you don't understand it, we're not going to sign it until you absolutely understand everything in that document. So that's important for informed consent. And we're going to talk a little bit more about informed consent and that whole process. But I did want to, let's just start at the top, just see how the trials are set up. Oh, Dr. Powell, sure.
Can I inject one thing with respect to the informed consent process? That
okay.
Just to add to what Camille said, a lot of people think, and you're an attorney, a lot of people think that informed consent is a contract. It is not. You can say 5 minutes after you sign an informed consent, you can decide you don't want to participate. And that's it, it's over. So I want that to be clear to people. Informed consent is not a contract that says you have to do something. because you don't.
Right. So the key takeaway with that, and I might have confused that issue by talking about contracts, but the key takeaway is you don't sign anything that you don't understand, and don't feel bad about asking questions. If you think it's like legal mumbo jumbo or medical mumbo, whatever, make sure, and that's what I think that's what Dr. Jones and Dr. Powell are both saying, make sure you understand it. But we're going to talk more about that. But let me ask Dr. Fichtenbaum, tell us, so you're head of the Moderna study for the COVID-19 vaccine. And, you know, and let me just say to Robert Brown, because he's been waiting to have a question answered, and we're going to get to your question in just a minute. But let's let Dr. Fichtenbaum tell us how's the whole trial set up? How's the clinical trial?
Sure. Well, we're doing the study here at UC, and we have a whole unit put together, and we have a team. And we have partnered with members of the community, many of whom are on this call this evening. We've gotten input on what's the best way to bring this study to our city and our town. I made a decision at the very beginning that we wanted to make this study representative of our city and representative of those who were involved, so that we made a special effort and a point to reach out to many different groups in the community and the people, know that they're welcome and respected, and that we want to earn your trust, and that we consider informed consent an ongoing process. Every time you come in, we want to make sure you understand what's going on, what we're doing, what it's about, what are the risks, what are the benefits, and what you're doing. And so we put together a team that looks like our community. So our team is diverse. We have people who speak English, Spanish, and we have folks from every different part of our community who are involved, so that when people come in, they feel very welcome and they see themselves. We have a beautiful new vaccine unit that was, the hospital put some resources into that so that people would come and be in a clean place, in a nice place that looked new. And, you know, we've enrolled so far in about a five-week period or so, about 158 individuals. 50% of our enrollment is non-white, which includes right now 26% who self-identify themselves as Black or African American, and 14% who identify themselves as Latino, Hispanic, or from multiple different races. So we're very proud of that, and we'll continue to do that, continue to work to earn people's trust. And so far, things are going well. You know, we're seeing the kind of expected things in a vaccine study. So you get a shot in the arm and it hurts, right? Of course, a vaccine hurts. Most people are having some mild effects. Some people have had a little bit of fever, a little achiness after that. Most of these things are gone within 2 or 3 days. And we've been giving second shots, and people are getting a little bit more achiness and fever. And actually, that's really kind of a good thing. So why is that a good thing? Nobody wants to get sick. What it means is their immune system is actually responding. When our immune system is healthy and responds to something, it sends out all these chemical signals which make us feel a little achy, like we got something going on, because a strong immune system is fighting. And so that's a good sign when people are noticing those things, because it means they're reacting to the vaccine and developing their own immunity, and we hope this will be protective. So, you know, we think things are going well. We think our site has been more of a model site because of our community engagement and because of our efforts. and our patients. And unlike other sites where they rammed in 500 people and it maybe was not so diverse, we went from the very beginning and said, it's not about quantity, it's about quality and the right place. And I think that's been recognized by others.
That's great. So, okay, let me get to Robert Brown has a second question. So we haven't even done his first question yet, which is, so now I'll put them together, Mr. Brown. So the first question was, do you cherry pick participants? And I guess really what we need to know is what's the criteria to participate in the study? And then his follow-up question is, how does one volunteer to participate in a trial?
Oh, sure. So what we did at the very beginning was we tried to do a lot of media things in all different media venues. So, you know, we had different members of our team on different radio programs, newspapers. We had some of our Spanish-speaking physicians were on some of the Spanish-speaking radio stations. We did interviews for Spanish-speaking television. One of our community outreach educator, Giselle Chapman, was on the Lincoln Ware radio show. And so we did a lot of things to sort of build momentum. And then we also created one of my co-principal investigator, Dr. Maggie Power Fletcher, created a whole electronic system where we could invite people to express interest. And then we would send them a follow-up to tell us more about themselves, to see if there was any reason they could not participate. And then those people have been put in a queue. And largely we do it on sort of first come, first served basis.
Dr. Fichtenbaum, so can one still sign up for the trial?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, you can. So, the easiest way, the easiest way to do that is to, if you want to send an email to UC COVID research at uchealth.com. It's UC COVID research at uchealth.com, or you can call 513-245-6317.
Okay.
And I'm going to double check that phone number.
Okay.
Make sure that's the right phone number. I did that from memory, and hopefully that's right.
Okay.
But yes, you can email us or contact us. And you can also call, I'll give you one other phone number that's direct, which is 513-584-6383, and that's our clinical research director, and she's been taking phone calls and been doing most of the scheduling. And so we are looking for more people to engage in this study.
Well, any certain criteria for the people you're looking for?
Yeah, no, actually, because it's pretty wide open. We need people over the age of 18. Okay. So we aren't not doing pediatric age or young children in this study. Okay. And the study is still open for people for wide age ranges. And, you know, we're looking for any and all people who would like to volunteer. And obviously we want to continue the momentum so that we have continue our diversity. So we're looking for anybody, and we're not cherry picking anybody in particular. And, you know, we're trying to do it as fairly as possible. And we also have another study coming. So if people don't have an opportunity in this one, we'll have another vaccine study coming too.
Okay, and then Deborah Spradley is asking, and you might have already answered, but just to be perfectly clear, so Deborah wants to know, do participants have to be totally healthy without any illnesses or conditions like diabetes, heart problems, high blood pressure, etc.? And she mentioned that so many African Americans have those, you know, what we've been calling pre-existing conditions. Is it okay to have those conditions and still participate?
Yeah, it is okay to have those. The kinds of things, the most important thing I think that really would affect people from being in the study is if you are taking certain medications that suppress your immune system, or if you have an active cancer, that might be something. The other thing to be real careful about is we're in the flu vaccine season, and you can't have a flu shot within 2 weeks of entering our study. So we just have to time that out the right way. We will get, people can get a flu shot when they're in the study. We just have to time it out so there's no conflicts. But people who have high blood pressure, who have asthma, diabetes, are welcome in the study. And these are many of the people who we worry about, people over 65. And so we do want to study them because we want to know, does the vaccine work? And my phone number was wrong. Let me give you the right phone number.
And I was going to say, give it to us again, Dr. Fichtenbaum, but just everyone, we want you to know it's going to be on COVID-19communityresources.com. But Dr. Fichtenbaum, let's just correct it for now. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. It's 513-245-3417. 3417. That's right. Yeah, I gave you the correct email address.
Okay, UC COVID research at uchealth.com. Well, let me ask Dr. Powell, because Dr. Fichtenbaum talked about how diversity is so important. And so, you know, Dr. Powell, you've been involved in, as you said, thousands or over 1,000 clinical trials. Why is participation so important?
Well, we've known for over 70 years that there's a potential for differences in response to different medications. The interesting thing about it was discovered when Black soldiers were given quinine to avoid malaria in Southeast Asia. And a lot of them got ill. The Black soldiers got ill because a lot of them had G6PD deficiency. And so we've known.
We have no idea what that is.
I know. And what it does is it's a disease that causes blood cells to rupture inside your body, okay. And it causes a lot of problems. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
But the point is, we began to understand that there are some genetic differences. There are some genetic and ancestry differences. There are environmental factors. There are diet, nutrition, comorbid or other coexisting diseases that can cause you to respond differently to a particular medicine. So it's important that, especially when this disease is so disproportionately impacting the minority population, that we understand what it takes and whether or not this product is safe and effective in the minority population. I tell people you have a choice. You can sit on the sidelines and hope and wait, and then other people can participate, and then you get a product approved. But then there's no guarantee that the data indicates that the product will be safe and effective for you. So you really, as much as we can, we want to be a part of the clinical trials to develop medicines that will be used to prevent a condition that we know overwhelmingly impacts our community. Because if we don't, of course, the problem is we won't be sure when the product is actually made available for us to use.
Okay, thank you. So now Donald Washington is asking, and it's a great question, are family members at risk for those participating in the trials? And I guess it has to do with, you know, are they getting like a live COVID?
No, that's a great question. Yeah. So no, the family members would not be at risk. The vaccine that we are studying is not the virus itself. It's just really literally a piece on the surface of the virus. And it's a code that we're injecting you inject it in the muscle, and this code makes a sort of self-timed out protein that doesn't last forever. And the proteins actually look just like the surface of the virus and allows the immune system to develop a response. But it's not the virus itself, so it's not catchy. Nobody else would get it. So there wouldn't be any risk to any other family or friends.
Okay, that's great. And, you know, let me ask Dr. Jones and Dr. Moore, because Dr. Powell brought up the malaria study. And, you know, whenever we hear about clinical trials, I think most of us start thinking about that 1932 Tuskegee syphilis experiment where so many African-American men died. and weren't treated for syphilis because of that study. And so, you know, what do we do about this mistrust? It sounds like things are different now, but, you know, how do we deal with that? And I can either Dr. Jones or Dr.
Certain.
Dr. Powell, either one.
Certainly.
Dr. Moore, okay.
About that, I think one of the things, and you've heard it here, education is not a one and done. We have to peel back, you know, in order to know, to make a decision about where you're going, you have to have a look back, just a look back, not long, to understand where you've been, right? What has occurred in the past? Why? You need a deeper understanding of that. So when we think about this mistrust, and we see it when we talk about, you know, our health centers and having people come into our health centers, and why don't we ask those questions? What would make people come? And you hear, oh, you know, it's about marketing. Yeah, you do have to market your services and what you're doing to the population. But when you look back at the Tuskegee study, it was the public health service that was involved, right? That funded the study. It was at Tuskegee. We had Nurse Eunice, who was an African-American trusted close to bringing in the participants in the study. So when you think about government, people, you know, you hear, oh, that's government involved, engaged, what's going on. So you got to peel back all of those layers that are there and really help people understand what occurred and what's in place as safeguards so that it doesn't happen again. And that, you know, what happened, and understanding that we as a country and as a community can't look at anyone and discard them and say, oh, well, you know, that population. And you heard Dr. Fichtenbaum talk about the widespread participation that he has in his study. So I think first we have to know the history, the facts in that history, to move us forward in understanding that myself, all of us, the listening participants on this call, on this town hall meeting, or those investigators that Dr. Powell talked about. We're all becoming investigators to ask the questions. Dr. Camille talked about the informed consent. You know, you don't sign anything, and you've all said it, you don't sign anything until you thoroughly understand it. We'll ask the questions. So become investigators. That's a short version of what some of the steps that have to be taken, but grounded in education, factual information.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. And that's, you know, and Iris Rowley was asking the question.
Oh, wait, Jan, I'd want to add to that.
I'll jump in. Well, I was just gonna say Iris Rowley was asking the question too about how do we build trust? How do we get over this mistrust so our communities can participate? And I think a lot of us, you know, still are just really nervous about being in a clinical trial. Camille, Dr. Jones, go right ahead.
So the reason that people are angry about the Tuskegee study is not that the men were in a trial. They're angry because when an effective treatment became available, it was not offered to them, okay? And so basically what you're looking at, if you're looking at participating in a trial, one of the questions would be, okay, there's like 5 different vaccine trials that are part of the Operation Warp Speed, you know, and the Moderna trial is the first one. Pfizer is doing stuff now too, and AstraZeneca, and there's other ones that will be coming on board. The question is, what happens if one of these other vaccines becomes available, you know, is shown to be effective while I'm in this study? Will you tell me? Will you unblind it? What happens if I was in the placebo arm and this vaccine is shown to be effective? Will I get it at the end of the study? I mean, how, you know, these are the things that you want to know because you want access to an effective medication. You know, that's really what you want.
And that's a good question. So let me, Dr. Powell's about to jump in and answer. So, you know, we're in the study. When we find that there's an effective vaccine, do we get it? Because we might be getting placebo while in the study. So,
well, you know, that's an interesting point. A lot of these trials, and I know Dr. Fichtenbaum might have a comment on this, but a lot of the trials, when you're doing a clinical trial for a vaccine for a disease that you know disproportionately kills. And so when you find a new therapy that has been proven effective, a lot of times a Data Safety Monitoring Board or other FDA will say, stop, because we know we got something that works. So let's move people off placebo. The difficult thing probably with the vaccine studies, we got a lot of different vaccines going on, and which one is going to work for who. So those are the questions we have to try to figure out how to answer. But I do want to comment on a couple of things with respect to mistrust of the Tuskegee. And because one of the things what I tell people that just about every advance in the regulation of how we do clinical trials and develop medications has been the result of a catastrophe. Okay, and Tuskegee was part of the catastrophe that led to a number of things: informed consent. Camille mentioned IRB, the Institutional Review Board, a protocol. There was no protocol, so it really wasn't a clinical trial. And in serious terms, it really wasn't an appropriate clinical trial because they had no protocol. They had no instruction of what they were going to do, and they were changing things as they were going along. So that was not that was an inappropriate experiment first. So because of what happened at Tuskegee, you've changed the rule, you've changed the setting. And so what, as I shared before, you do informed consent, and you have the right to say, okay, I don't want to do this. At any time you choose to say that, and they have to stop. So, and the other thing with respect to mistrust, if like you said, the informed consent is designed for you to be able to read and understand, or get somebody, the other part of trust is to get somebody you have some trust relationship with, to talk about it and share and say, engage with people that do understand the science, who can share with you in a way that you can understand it. Because as we said 3, 4, 10 times, if you don't understand it, walk away.
Walk away. And here's a great question. So Iris Rowley has a follow-up question, and this is for Dr. Camille Jones. So she said, how can the community participate in the IRB process? And tell us, you know, like who's on this, like not necessarily the names, but you know, what people from what walks of life are on this? Is it internal review board? Is that what IRB stands for?
It's institutional review board. And institutional review boards have to have both people who have scientific knowledge and people who are community members, you know, representing the communities. You know, if you can, you want to have an ethicist on the board, but you want to have a lot of different viewpoints, because you get learning from people who may not just say, oh, this is a great study, let's just do it, let's just do it. And other people go, wait a second, just wait, you know. That kind of diversity is what you have. And basically, they review it from the viewpoint of how do we protect the human subjects? And that's their charge. It's not how do we make science go forward or this, that, the other. It's like, is this a valid study? And how can we make sure that the risks and benefit is okay, and that the human subjects are protected at all times? Okay,
that's great. Thank you so much. So Dr. Fichtenbaum, let me just ask you quickly about that, because you know, I think all of our attendees understand, you know, placebo versus getting the real deal. So the people participating don't know if they're getting a real vaccine or the, you know, the fake vaccine, just to compare the two, right? I'll just call it the fake vaccine. You're getting something that's not the vaccine. So how does that work when the real vaccine becomes available? What happens with those who weren't getting it?
Well, it's a great question. So first of all, we want to, I don't know what people are getting either. I'm blinded as well. So when the Data Safety Monitoring Board checks the data and finds that there is a difference and shows that a vaccine is working, the next step that happens is they make recommendations to the study team that if the effect is significant, that they should make available to the people getting placebo the vaccine to give them an option to get it if they want, and that to then inform the public about the information as well so that people would know. So in the Moderna trial, in no uncertain terms, if we find there is a benefit before the study is over, the participants will be informed of this, and those people who were assigned to placebo will be able to have access to the vaccine. And that's important too, and we'll still follow people because we want to know how long does the vaccine work, how safe it is, and we need to follow people. And vaccine studies often follow people for a couple of years, and that's what's being proposed here. So we want to make sure anybody who got the real vaccine that we're following you for a couple of years. So we will do that. And also, if there's another vaccine that is shown to be a benefit, then we're going to let the study participants know. But I think it's really important that there's a couple of big picture concepts here. One vaccine will not be enough for the 6 to 7 billion of us on this earth. And in fact, the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine require significant refrigeration and freezing and 2 shots, which means in many parts of the world, that's not going to be an effective answer. So my hope is that we will have 3 or 4 vaccines that might be effective and that they be able to be used in different parts of the world, because I want everyone to have access to a vaccine, and that also it will take a while to manufacture it. Even if we had a vaccine tomorrow, you know, the question is who would get it and how fast can we get it to them? And that's going to take time, even if it's available right away. So I think there are a number of safeguards. And before I yield the floor back, I want to say one of the first things that I did as a young man who was learning how to be an infectious disease doctor was I did a detailed study of 2 different studies. I studied the Oslo study of syphilis that was begun in the late 1800s, was done largely on white people, was a very careful, very good scientific study which taught us everything we needed to know about syphilis. And then I have in my papers still the original papers written on Tuskegee. This was a flawed study from the start. It came with a bad premise. It came with a racist premise. And it did not include any white people. If you are going to say that one disease acts differently in one group versus another, you have to study them at the same time. And you have to do the same thing. And it was poorly run, poorly designed. And it was, in my opinion, akin to the Nazi experiments that were done. And it took us years as a country to say it was wrong. It wasn't until 1972, I believe, that the Congress actually ever said it was wrong and apologized. And this is totally unacceptable. And so this is the kind of thing that I carry with me. Racism is alive and well in our society. And I don't expect people to trust me right away. I need to earn that. But I recognize this, and I value and respect every human being. And I know that we won't get the answers to solve life's problems unless all of us participate. And I will never be part of a study that is unethical and puts people unnecessarily at risk.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Fichtenbaum. Let me just give a comment from Robert Brown about the trust factor, and then we have some more questions about the study. But Mr. Brown said the trust factor is the extraordinary heavy lift and contributes as well to healthcare disparities. Arguably, the idea of healthcare equity is illusory. It simply does not exist for the minority population. We have a lot of work to do. So, Mr. Robert Brown, thank you for that comment, and I think that's so true. Here's another question that's asking, is there a certain percentage of African Americans needed to make this study valid? I think we said that there are 26% of those in the current Moderna study are African American. Cincinnati is almost 50% African American. I think our number is 47%. Do we need more African Americans in the study? And then another question related to that is, do you need people from certain age groups?
So let me just clarify that nationally, the Moderna study is about 10% Black or African American nationally. And that's not enough. If you just were to look purely at numbers, a minimum number would be 15%, because you have to look at the population of your country to say if it's going to be representative, it's got to be that minimum number. But in my mind, if you have an illness that is disproportionately affecting one group or another, you want to make sure that whoever is being affected, if it's people who are blue, you know, you want those people to be represented in the study in sufficient numbers. So if you ask me what should it be at the end of the day, I think we should have something like 20% participation as a real minimum. So we've exceeded that in Cincinnati, and that's our goal, and we're going to stick by that. But that's not every other site that Moderna is doing. And similarly with the other vaccine studies, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Novavax will be having a study, and Sanofi will be having a study as well. We want to make sure at least Cincinnati is doing its part. And frankly, I have done my part to try and elevate very preeminent leaders like Dr. Powell and others to make sure they're part of the national conversation, which they have been on CNN and in Science, so that they get the opportunity to speak. That, I think, is very important for somebody like me. If I'm going to live and walk the talk and live the walk, I am going to let others speak, people who deserve the right to speak about these things. So that's my role, is to try and do as best I can to open doors and to deal with the issue of white privilege and to make sure that we have the right people who are at the table. I actually asked at Operation Warp Speed that we need to have investigators who are from the community to be part of the leadership of these teams. And that needs to be something that happens with many of our studies, so that we can have the right kinds of diverse teams of people leading studies. That will help with trust too, I think, very much.
Okay, very good, thank you. So another question.
Well, one comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Powell, go right ahead.
One comment, if I could. You mentioned the level of participation and what it should it be, and two things. One, Project Impact and the National Medical Association has advocated both to FDA, to Congress, and to NIH that the representation should be proportional to the disease, the burden of disease. It's not proportional to population, proportional to the burden of disease. And what that means is 10% or 13% is nowhere near enough, because you want to understand, you really want to understand what it does in the population. So that's one thing we've challenged quite a bit. And the other thing is you want to have statistically and clinically meaningful, be able to make statistically and clinically meaningful statements regarding the product in African-American patients. If in fact you get to the end of the study and you can't make decisions, make statements regarding that, then you really haven't done what you needed to do. Now, you know that remdesivir, for instance, everybody hears about remdesivir, but people don't really recognize that remdesivir had insufficient numbers of African-Americans. And the fact of the matter is, it's being used, but unfortunately, they can't tell you whether it's what effect it has in African American patients. And that's unfortunate because they didn't have enough. They didn't have enough to be able to make a conclusion. So the point is, you really want to have the necessary number of people to make a clinically meaningful conclusion about the product in the African American population.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just add one thing. We know that the number of people who have had COVID already is less than 10% and probably more around 5%. We know that everyone's susceptible, and we also know that African Americans have had disproportionate impact. The other thing is we know that when the vaccines become available, it's probably going to take about a year to ramp up so everybody can get some. And so, you know, there is a benefit that one can think of by participating in these studies, because basically, you know, you have access potentially, you have what, a 2/3 chance of getting an active vaccine in these studies, have access before you might otherwise be able to get access by maybe a year or so. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that there was a symposium recently by Johns Hopkins University on the whole thing about the development of the COVID vaccine. And what I will do is I'm going to turn my video off for a second and just go pop the link. It was recorded into the chat so that, you know, if you want to listen to it, it was like 3 hours. It was very informative. They had 5 sections. One section talking about where we are now, you know, with the vaccine across the U.S. One thing talking about ethics. One thing talking about, you know, various different parts of this whole conundrum. And so I'll just pop that into the chat right now.
Okay, and then, you know, we'll also put that on COVID-19 communityresources.com so people can access it. So that's really good. Dr. Moore, I saw you about to jump in.
Yes, Yes, what I was going to say is it's so important that what we're doing today, again, we need, and we're hearing, and we know we need more minority participation, because we know the number of people have been disproportionately, African Americans have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. So we need more people of color in those studies. And I know there's work underway with many of the people who are on this video chat to have that discussion, to talk to the provider base, as well as talking to the community and getting their input and learning and really understanding, peeling back those layers to get to what will it take for us to increase the numbers into the study for people to be willing to do that. I think some of the sentiment that we're hearing now is, and we've heard it, when the vaccine becomes available, we're not going to receive as much as we need initially. So now you're talking about who will receive, and then there are plans underway through Project Warp Speed, talking about the phases, phase 1B, phase 1A, 1B, and such, that you want to cover the healthcare population and those long-term care facilities, nursing and skilled. You want to be able to do that. But I think fundamentally, we have to have that discussion to clear the room to say, you know, the issue that I am hearing, and it makes you think about this. We can't put the politics in this. You can't politicize this. Vaccines have to go through the trials and the time that it takes to bring it fully, safely, efficaciously to market. And that was the comment that I believe many people heard, but they didn't break it down like that. But we don't want to rush something for the sake of trying to prove a point. And it's not the people on this panel. So we have to be very careful in making sure that as we're out and we're talking about this, that we're talking about taking the politics out and moving vaccine trials through, as you will hear from the panel, that vaccine has gone through those steps, those measures, to give people that level of safety, that it's safe, to participate, but definitely we need more minorities, people of color, to participate in the studies. So bringing this information forward through health centers, you know, through blogs, social media accounts, it's very important that we get the information out.
Okay, great. Thank you. Absolutely. So someone else asked, thank you. Someone else asked, is there payment to participate in these trials?
Yeah, so there is payment. So study participants do receive compensation because they are spending their time. Some of them may miss an hour or two of work here. We try to be very flexible, but we do want to compensate people for their time, and we help with transportation. The money does come to the University of Cincinnati to pay for the people who are working on the study and provide support and all of the necessary things that we need, the personal protective equipment, all of the things that are necessary for that. So there is money coming to the university. It doesn't come to me personally. Do I receive support in my salary? Absolutely. If I'm doing the work, they're going to pay me, and that's part of what researchers do. And so that's an important part. And I think we have to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room. Look, there's a certain person at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who has made this a very political thing, and nobody wants to trust that. And that's understandable. And particularly in the Black community, why would you want to trust? Yeah. And I understand that. But we have to recognize that there are scientists and investigators and people like Dr. Jones, like Dr. Powell, like Dr. Moore, who are all across the country here working on these studies with our passion, our heart and soul, because we care about human beings. And we want the science to guide this, not the politics.
Yes.
More than anything else, I think Senator Harris expressed this, that if the scientists say it's okay, she's going to line up to take the vaccine. And that's very important, because I agree with her 100%. I don't want to hear the politicians tell us what it is or it isn't. And I will be the first on the airways to say this is not ready for prime time. But if it works, and we believe that the science works, then I think we all have to say, how do we want to do our part to protect grandma, grandpa, our community, our neighbors, our friends? I have been through these pandemics before. I have seen things devastate communities, and we need answers. We'll only get answers if people help us and join with us, because the real heroes and heroines of this are people who volunteer and do these studies. It's not me. I'm simply here doing my part to try and help our community. But those people I am forever indebted to, because they are making a personal sacrifice to help all of us.
Well, thank you, Doctor. We appreciate that. Okay, we're running out of time. I've got some questions that I need you guys to answer quickly. Okay, give us your quick answer. I'm going to throw this to Dr. Jones. This is from Willa Shelby, and she said, could someone briefly explain, we're going to emphasize briefly because we're running out of time, could someone briefly explain the advantage or reason for a blind or double-blind study? Where is the benefit?
The benefit is that the researcher may have an innate belief about whether some sort of treatment is effective. And if they don't, if you see a person and you know they're on that treatment, you might say, well, whatever symptom or thing they're manifesting is or is not related to the treatment based on what you think the treatment does. It sort of takes that bias out of the picture.
Okay, all right, great, thank you so much. And then another question, are there any Black-owned organizations that are leading these studies? Does anyone know any Black-owned organizations? Dr. Powell, you look like you're trying to answer, but you're on mute. Dr. Powell, oh, there you go, okay.
The unfortunate part is I do not know if there are any Black-owned organizations participate in these trials. One of the things that I've encouraged people to do, and the people that are running these trials, is to track and keep keep track of the level of involvement of minority investigators in the trial, because if it's important to you, you measure it. If it's important that you get the right investigators that have the trust of the community in the trial, then you measure the degree to which that happens. And what I share with them is we really need to be doing that for these kinds of trials, but I don't know of any particular Black organizations that are participating.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, we are running out of time. This has been such a great discussion. My takeaway from this is that we need to participate in these clinical trials. There are safety measures in place. We're going to be treated ethically. There's the consent part that Dr. Jones talked about, that, you know, several of you talked about, where we have to understand what it is we're signing up to do. And that's so important, that we understand what it is we are agreeing to do. And when a vaccine becomes available, we will get it. We won't be left out of that. And so it seems safe. And there's the IRB that's overseeing all of this. And so that's really important. We've got the NMA looking in as well. And so we appreciate all of that. So for information, you can go for the Moderna trial that Dr. Carl Fichtenbaum is heading up. You can go to UC COVID research at uchealth.com. And Iris was asking, how do we get all this information out to the community? So we're going to have it on COVID-19 communityresources.com. And we do have to get this information out. We do need to participate in this study. We need this vaccine. We want to make sure that all of our communities get effective vaccine so we can get over this, as I'm calling it, this COVID mess. We got to get through it. So I want to thank our wonderful panelists, Dr. Carl Fichtenbaum, Dr. James Powell, Dr. Melba Moore, Dr. Camille Jones, and I'm going to turn the program over to our fearless leader at the Center for Closing the Health Gap, Renee Mahaffey-Harris. Renee, come on in with your
okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for moderating, Councilmember Kearney, but I first of all want to thank Drs. Camille Jones, Dr. James Powell, Dr. Carl Fichtenbaum, and our Health Commissioner, Dr. Melba Moore, for the conversation today. I look at today as a first step. We talked about a lot of information, and so really my takeaway is that we need to do more knowledge building for us. I think the conversation on mistrust is real. I will say that my perception, my immediate response around these issues is concern, right? I need to have more information. So I do know that we are going to work together with Dr. Powell, Dr. Fichtenbaum, and Dr. Moore and Dr. Jones, all of you and many others, including the Cincinnati Medical Association, the National Medical Association, to make sure that, as Dr. Powell stated, that not only are we going to make sure that the diversification that needs to occur with participation based upon the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and many other diseases occur for the Black and Brown populations, but that also we look at policy that ensures that when it comes to building a trial, when it comes to determining the investigators, and as Dr. Powell said, measure it, that will be the evidence of whether or not we are involved at the rate and levels we should be involved at every stage of creating any vaccine for any disease. But right now we're talking about the urgency of COVID-19 and the fact that we know, the data tells us, that we are disproportionately impacted by deaths as well as incidents of COVID-19 in the United States and in our city and in our region and our state. I am so excited that we are going to begin this conversation. I do believe that this is a start of many more sessions of information, and we are really very fortunate that Dr. Fichtenbaum is willing to provide his expertise and knowledge and be a part of these conversations, because that's also how we begin to address the mistrust. If you begin to understand all the facets and who's involved, and you have the ability to ask questions of the individuals involved, I think that will begin to knock down many of the barriers. I'm not going to say it happens quickly, but I do believe that this is a first step. I'm sure there are other steps, and Dr. Powell has been, he's modest, but Dr. Powell has been leading the fight to ensure that Black and Brown participation in clinical trials across this country happens. And he has been leading and being the champion on that fight for decades. So we have great champions who are here with us today and who are going to continue to be a part of this process, not just locally, but nationally. And I thank you all. I thank all who listened. We will make sure that we make all of the information that was shared today available on COVID-19communityresources.com, which is a collaboration with the African American Chamber of Commerce, Eric Kearney, the Urban League of Greater Cincinnati and Southwest Ohio, Eddie Cohen, the NAACP, Joe Mallory and Robert Richardson, and the Cincinnati Medical Association, Dr. Roosevelt Walker, and our own council member, Jan-Michele Lemon Kearney. So we thank you all for joining us today. Stay tuned for more, and thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.